Good evening, and welcome to tonight's panel. My name is Lazarus Gooseby. I'm an alum of CSU and current president of the CSU Foundation's Alumni Council Advisory Board. And tonight, we have teamed up with the Alumni Association to bring you tonight's panel. COVID-19 has impacted us in many ways. If you think back 18 months ago, how your life was versus how it is today, you can see a tremendous amount of change. Maybe some for the good, maybe some for the bad. We are here tonight to help you figure out if you've been off track, how to get back on track, and how to do some self-care to make sure that you're doing the best that you can during these trying times as we try to come out of this pandemic. As we look back, we think on some of the things that we might have slacked on as we have been in this pandemic for such a long time, whether that's not eating as healthy as we should, mentally not giving ourselves the time to decompress when we get off work, not working out, even though technically if you're working from home, you probably have a little bit more time than you did previously, but for some reason, you're just not motivated to go work out. So these are the things that we want to discuss tonight and figure out how do we get over those challenges? How do we become better? How do we take care of ourselves better going forward so that we can be the best that we can be and put our best foot forward, be our best person as we go to work, as we deal with our families, and as we try to take care of our business that we want to do so we can become successful. So tonight, I just want to thank you for logging in, and we hope you get a lot out of tonight's conversation. To begin, I'd like to introduce you to tonight's moderator and president of CTC CSU Alumni Association, my good friend, Yvette Warren. Yvette, take it away.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Lazarus. It is an honor and a privilege to serve with you on the board of directors of the Chicago Teachers College, Chicago State University Alumni Association, as well as on the Alumni Advisory Council. I'd like to extend a gracious gratitude to you, the foundation, for inviting us to participate and co-host and moderate this wonderful discussion this evening. I recall distinctly where I was on March 14th, 2020. I was sitting in my office with my colleague. We were drafting out our strategic plan for the remainder of the year. And that was Saturday. On Monday, the world changed. And so during this almost 20 months, we've all been challenged. We've all been stretched. We've all been given an opportunity to really take stock in what normal really means, right? So today's conversation, we're going to dig a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about how we can give ourselves and each other some grace. We're going to talk about some opportunities that we might have to do it better, faster, smarter going forward, and to do some real reflection on something that I have a frequency of saying: put your own oxygen mask on first before you can help somebody else. So joining us for this discussion this evening are three experts that I am so honored to call sister friends. Dr. Natalie Santiago Brown, pediatrician at Chicago Family Health Center. Dr. Leslie Roundtree, who has a whole lot of alphabets behind her name. Dr. Roundtree, I love you. Dr. Roundtree is the interim provost and a licensed occupational therapist, interim provost at Chicago State University. Dr. Sherilyn Garrett, who also has a lot of alphabets behind her name. I love it so much. And she is the chair of the Chicago State University Counseling Department, professor of psychology, and licensed clinical professional counselor. And Dr. Santiago, fun fact, I know that you are a yoga instructor and a plant-based expert, plant-based food expert. So I am excited to welcome each of you today to join us for this great conversation. We're going to have fun. We're going to get real. We're going to relax. This is a moment, I look at this as a sister friend roundtable, right?
Absolutely.
And we get to say, as I care for myself, I'm caring for my sister. I am my sister's keeper and my brother's keeper. And so as we have this conversation amongst family, and we talk about all of the wonderful things that we have to look forward to and all of the learnings that we've had over the past 18 to 20 months. I am just excited to welcome each of you, and let's have a good time. Wusa, right? Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to start with Dr. Santiago Brown. Natalie, as a physician on the front line, and you have been on the front line of COVID-19 pandemic since its beginning, and often we have had opportunities to have sidebars. That I'm in the ER, I'm at the hospital, and I'm just like, sis, I'm praying with you. I'm praying with you. I'm praying for you. So tell us, what do you think the current state of this Delta variant? What's the data telling us? What is the science telling us right now, to your knowledge?
Thank you so much, Madam President. So with any virus, they have the opportunity or the ability to mutate. They're smarter than us. That's why they've been around for millennia. And so once we figure out a way to kind of, zap them, they evolve. So right now we're dealing with a new variant known as the Delta. The Delta has been shown to be more virulent, meaning that it's more easily transmissible. And when people contract COVID with that variant, they're often sicker. It spreads more easily. Right now, we're also looking at a new variant that's emerging called the Mu variant. Still don't quite know a lot about it yet, but there's been some talk that the Mu variant is actually possibly a little bit more resistant to our current, way of managing COVID as far as treatment and as far as vaccinating. The jury is still out, of course, still a lot of research that needs to be done on that. So that's kind of where we are with the variants.
Thank you so much. Dr. Garrett, as you look at it from the psychological perspective and from the mental health perspective, what are you seeing to be the current sort of indicators that we are finding as a manifestation of COVID?
Well, thank you for that question. We're seeing a rise in definitely mental health needs in the community, definitely an increase in adverse reactions. And by that, just negative things that are occurring for our population. So we see an increase in people having difficulty sleeping by 36%. We have seen that same thing with eating. Whether we're eating too much, we say the COVID-20 or the COVID-30 that people are gaining or losing by not eating. And then there's, of course, an increase in alcohol and substance use by at least 12%. And then an increase in a worsening of chronic conditions prior to that the people had prior to COVID-19 by at least 12%. Also an increase in suicide. It was steadily rising pre-COVID, but we've also seen an increase in that manner, in that as well. So definitely just a lot of impactful adverse reactions in mental health services. And we've also seen an increase in people reaching out for mental health services, which is great.
Thank you so very much for that insightful information. Dr. Roundtree, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think we've also heard quite a bit about increased anxiety among people. Mm-hmm. Our students at the university have expressed increased anxiety, even friends and family. People don't know how to readjust. It's a readjustment. So I think that's an additional stressor that we're not used to at this point.
That's a very, very good point, Dr. Roundtree. As we talk about that a little bit more, often we say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to protect myself and I'm going to keep things away from me. And I have my gloves on and I have all these things. What are some of the things, and I'm going to ask you to open this conversation up, Dr. Roundtree, what are some of the things that you think we might be doing that are counterproductive, if you might?
Well, I think that's a good question, Yvette. As an occupational therapist, we look at people's routines and habits because our routines and habits create the lifestyle that creates the comfort for us. And this pandemic caused havoc to those routines and to those habits. So, we all went home really quick and we thought we could work at the kitchen table or at the dining room table, spread out at the coffee table and work. Well, those chairs are not set up for you to be working at a desk for long hours a day. If you think about it, office chairs are actually taller than dining room chairs. And so people were starting to get back pains and leg pains and neck pains. We also started to slowly stop doing activities. Everything became, I'll have it delivered. And so, let alone if you didn't do exercise, you may have done exercise at home, but now you quit exercising, but you also quit walking to the store, quit walking through the store, quit walking to the bus stop, quit walking. And so, they say you need 10,000 steps a day. Steps were down to about 400. And if you went from one room to the next, so the exercise. And then I think as time went on, you started to see people lose their just daily routines. Our daily routines and our daily activities, like getting up, brush your teeth, comb your hair, put on your clothes, all of those kind of create a pattern for us to feel good about ourselves. And you could see it on Zoom, where people are getting a little bit more unkept. The hairdos were going away.
True.
Was disappearing. I didn't get to see any of those yoga pants, but I can tell you there are a lot of yoga pants and you weren't feeling as good about yourself. And you've all heard about the doctor's appointments. We gave up the doctor's appointments, the dentist appointments, the eye doctor, and so we've lost that pattern that was keeping us moving.
It helps, right? I'm trying not to be rude and had it on mute. That's a phenomenal point, Dr. Roundtree. Dr. Santiago Brown, I'm going to pivot to you because I think she just gave you an intro. Let's talk a little bit about how it's manifested in a medical or a physical perspective.
Yes, definitely. And she's 100% correct. Our office visits were down a lot, which I totally understand. In the beginning, we didn't really know much and people were afraid, especially, as a pediatrician, people don't want to bring their children out if they're well. They can do their well visit some other time, they're fine. And so as a result, we do have some children who have gotten behind on their vaccinations. Some children, they may not, they may have had, minor issues like asthma, where asthma wasn't, children weren't really having a lot of flares with asthma, because they were at home. They weren't out in the elements. They weren't around other children, but they still needed to have their, asthma assessed regularly and, make sure that we have their medications and things like that. Also, one thing that we've been seeing is that a lot of, school-age children, because they've spent, the last year and a half basically in front of a screen all day, there's been some changes in their vision. And so, children also were not going to to their eye doctor. And so when we're doing school physicals, we're kind of picking up on this change in their vision. And then, of course, dental. When you're at the dentist, you can't wear a mask. So, as a result, many dentist offices were closed. And so dental care really suffered as well.
Wow. When I think about that, and then I think about and someone mentioned earlier, the rise in suicide rate. And I think about the impact on mental health. And specifically, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into what you just said, Natalie, in regards to children and the fact that they have been isolated for so long through this, and thinking about how that's affected the trauma of the mental trauma that we're seeing even across our city. And Dr. Garrett, I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit from your purview on that.
Well, you said the key word, and it's trauma. And it's something that continues to happen on a daily basis. Prior to COVID, we know if we turn on the TV, we'd see things happen across the city. And it was all of us were being traumatized. Mm-hmm. Now you add a layer of COVID on top of that. And it's just a complex trauma has continued to form for each and every one of us in certain ways. And some people, of course, I've said this before, they'll say, oh, I didn't have trauma. I don't watch the news a lot because of what we see continuously over and over and over and over. And it really does affect what we do and how we act and react. And so we can see it when we're in the classroom. I know that teachers that we speak to in CPS talk about the type of kid that they were seeing prior to. Now, these kids that are coming back have lacked socialization for 18 months or more. Mm-hmm. And so they were at home with mom being the teacher or whomever being the teacher, or them teaching themselves, not being able to react with or interact with each other. We talk about that. I think that has led to some of the things that we're seeing on the streets, not having people to monitor them during the day sometimes while people were out working or trying to work. And there was definitely a lack of services in some of the communities as far as mental health. And so them not being able to talk or speak to someone about what they were feeling or how they were reacting has definitely increased the need for continued mental health services, as well as them lacking the socialization that they're going to need and the mental health services that need to be put more into the school environment as they are returning. And so not only for them, but for the teachers, how it's impacted them as trying to teach on a Zoom or another type of platform, trying to ensure that their children were safe and they were paying attention, that they were also learning, dealing with their own mental health. So you said something that I always say as well, Yvette, as we were logging on, putting your own mask on first. That is the thing that I always lead with, is that before we try to save someone else, that we have to put our own mask on first. And so just turning to the self-care piece of it, that's something that's going to be very important for us all to do as we are coming back to somewhat a normalcy, what our new normal is. And so putting that on. And so what I tell people is that you cannot give from an empty cup. So I prefer to think of it as my cup is being full and I'm giving you my overflow.
See.
And so that's how I'm working with our students. That's what I'm trying to teach them, is that you just cannot, I'm not looking at the glass half full. My glass has to be full. So I can't help you take care of anyone if my glass is not full. I will pour from my overflow. So that's what I definitely want to talk about and in that relationship. And Dr. Roundtree talked about an important piece of it as well, about the anxiety that everyone has. A lot of people are definitely anxious as you are moving about, going into the stores, doing things, going into restaurants. That has definitely increased the level of anxiety. I think for all of us, I'm very hesitant sometimes when I go in, people don't have masks on. I'm looking around, I'm like, but it definitely has changed. And so again, I'll go back to our new normal, and that I'll say that 4 in 10 adults now report symptoms of anxiety. And those were some of the adverse reactions that I was talking about earlier. And so prior to the pandemic, it was 1 in 10. So you can see the increase. Mm-hmm. And so we just have to continue to talk to people about, this is something that is normal for the things that we've been through and are currently going through.
I am absolutely in agreement with you. One of the things that I have gotten personally very comfortable with is no is a complete sentence.
Absolutely.
and allowing myself grace.
Exactly.
You know, and I'm going to pick on us, as since we're all sister friends here, we are so hard on ourselves, on the things that we should have done, wish that we could have done, the people that we should have touched, we wish we could. You know, one of the things my daughter said a long time ago, and it resonates with me, and I teach this now, is rubber balls and crystal balls. Everything's not a crystal ball.
Absolutely.
And you have to know the difference, right? You have to understand which ones, if they shatter, they can never go back together again. And which ones you can catch on the next bounce. And so for me, this has been a reminder and a sign I used to keep over a desk at one of my offices, and it was BBP. Boundaries, balance, and priorities.
Absolutely.
And every day, because especially if you're in a role of service, which all of us are, when you are in a role of service, you have to understand how to give yourself grace. We're too hard on ourselves.
Absolutely.
And that to me is self-care, being able to say no with a smile. I love you, but no. And also telling myself it's okay.
And Yvette, if I could just say, people think that when they say no, that they have to give an explanation behind the no. And so one of the things that I have to keep saying to people is no is, like you said, a complete sentence. You don't have to give an explanation. No is no. And so that's something that we've all had to kind of, I think, work on and practice. And it's something that I know that for me has been a difficult thing as well, because I'm like trying to get everything in. And I'm like, no, I can't do everything. So I have to, definitely choose those things that I feel are going to be helpful for me and also helpful for my own mental health.
Absolutely. And the greater good,
Absolutely.
Also being in a opportunity where every day what you are doing, it has a greater purpose than yourself. I think that's another form for myself. That's another form of self-care. Absolutely. Because I have to know that it's a value add. Is the juice worth the squeeze? As someone taught me a long time ago. That being stated, let's talk a little bit how we combat all of this misinformation that's out there in the world. That there is so much, right? I was having a conversation with a young man in his late 30s 2 days ago, and he was saying to me, giving me his rationale on why he does not believe in the vaccination. Right? And in his rationale, it was because there is so much conflicting information in the world. And it's coming from leadership. It's coming from top down, across the bottom, up to that, wherever, right? And so our conversation was how you use your own personal critical thinking, or as my daddy used to say, common sense, to filter through that noise. So how do you, Dr. Garrett, guide people through that maze?
I actually have had so many of these conversations with individuals in my family, my siblings, just everywhere. And so one of the things that I do is just exactly what you said, is to have them, I kind of test what they kind of say to me and go on to ask them, we'll look at the CDC. I just kind of challenge it a little bit, because people are always thinking black or white, either or, and they are not taking a look at the information that really truly is provided. And I tell them kind of where I get my information from and the things that I am listening to. And I have friends that are physicians, and I listen to kind of the things that they're talking about. And so I trust that. And so we talk about those individuals. I talk about what the CDC says, and they've made it very plain on what it is that they feel is the correct course of action. And so that's what I lead with when we're having these conversations. And so as they say things, we know the things in history and historical accounts of things that have happened, and that's what people are bringing up. But I challenge when they say certain things. I just challenge their beliefs, and so I use a sense of reality, just kind of like you said, reality and common sense. And I can't make the decision for you, but this is the information that I've been provided, and I want to provide you with this particular set of information and skills. And so that's kind of where I go with them. And so I'm definitely a reality tester. And so those are things that I particularly have done. And I think that for the most part, the majority of the people that I have spoken with have at some point gone ahead and gotten the vaccine because they felt like they then had the correct information.
Thank you so much. Before I bring Dr. Roundtree into this particular conversation, I'm going to just invite all of our audience to email us questions. This is live. We're doing this interactive. You're part of the Sister Girl Roundtable. Come on. Email questions to foundation@csu.edu. Dr. Roundtree, let's continue that conversation about combating misinformation. You are the provost over a dynamic, if I must say, university. And you have from baby boomer to Gen Z. So I look at it's like a laboratory in human behavior, right? And so how do you combat misinformation on campus?
I think very much what Dr. Garrett said. Some of it is just giving the correct information about what has happened in the past, as well as I often try to compare to things that we already know. We're a world that has eradicated polio. We all took the shot. We took it and we did this. I try to compare it to things that people know. Many people take the flu shot. They've been taking it for years, such as myself. This is similar to the flu shot. We don't know which flu version we're getting this year, but we feel comfortable in it. So I try to get people to think about how we've protected ourselves and how the science has always been, we don't know exactly everything, but we know enough to trust it, and then we move forward. But I never tell anyone to not be more, just keep aware of their own body. You have to be aware of your own body. Each of us are going to react very differently. And so if something's not feeling right to you, check it out. You know, if you want to stay home 3 extra days to try to figure out what this vaccine might do to you, and then stay home 3 and call your doctor.
I agree with you totally. And Dr. Santiago, as you are Santiago Brown, I have to remember my sister friend is now, she's married now, y'all. As you are influencing parents in the midst of trauma, right? Again, because they come in, 99% of us don't come in to see our pediatrician just because, other than the regular, okay, I have the shots that have to happen at this interval, etc. But then you have the disruption of that flow because people aren't coming in for the routine, right? And so now they're worried because they're getting all this information in the ethers, right? And then the baby catches a cold, and then they're like, Lord Jesus, save my baby. And you're trying to educate them. How do you manage that?
That is a great question. And I do want to say that, you know, the most precious thing that anyone has is their baby. And I respect and honor these parents who have trusted me with the care of their children. It's truly an honor. And I totally understand the confusion, you know, from, like you said, from leadership, even from the CDC. There's a lot of misinformation. Of course, there are also people who are famous who have a great platform and put out misinformation. And no one is going to, maybe listen to me with my, 500 followers versus someone else who has millions, so there have been many times when I've talked with parents, not just about, the vaccines against COVID, but, vaccines in general. And I start the question with, if they say they don't want it, I start the conversation with, what questions can I answer for you? Because a lot of times, parents just haven't had the opportunity to discuss it. They've just seen all these things out on the internet, on Facebook or whatever. And it does get very confusing. And I will say that, I've shared with parents, and I would never recommend for someone else's child what I wouldn't do for my nieces and nephews. Those are my babies. And to be honest, I actually vaccinated 3 of my nieces and nephews. They came into the office. I was just there to see a patient. I wasn't supposed to be doing vaccines. And, we were short vaccinators. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll give vaccines. And I was given the Pfizer, which is now, known as Comirnaty, is the approved date. And, because only that's the only vaccine that's available for children, they came to me. And so when I shared that with parents, that not only am I triple vaccinated because of high risk, I also vaccinated my babies. They feel a little bit more comfortable. And one of the common misconceptions out there, of course, is the microchip, or, there's something magnetic in the arm. A lot of those like memes or pictures that people were sharing of something magnetic, they had their arm out like this. So of course, gravity is going to keep it from falling. It's not magnetic. And I've also shared with parents, and teens, they're concerned about being tracked. This is a tracker. We pay every month for it, and we've been paying for it for 20 plus years.
Right.
There's no greater tracker than this one. And, so with correct information and with humor and with support, we have these conversations, and the parents many times will agree to get their children vaccinated and themselves.
Excellent. And just thinking about, there are 3-year-olds that all they're going to know is this world, right? They're coming into this new normal, whatever that might be. They're coming into this new normal with us raising them, and we're all suffering with some form of PTSD, whether it be a little bit or a whole lot, right? And so all of these things are being part of their message that they're coming up with. So, Dr. Santiago Brown, what's your thoughts on this? I know that we can't project the future or anything like that, but what are your thoughts about how we could sort of help mitigate, if nothing else, and navigate and be the navigators for this next generation?
That is a really good question. And, of course, information is ever evolving. One thing that I recommend for parents and, for adults as well, who don't have young children, is to try to keep as normal a routine as possible. The world pretty much stopped on March 14th. And many of us haven't really picked back up. But, as much as parents can make things as normal as they possibly can, talking with their children, encouraging their children to speak to them about any concerns that they're having, any fears they're having. And the same thing for the parents. I think a lot of times I see, mostly moms, of course, usually moms bring their babies to the office. But a lot of times moms, take on so much on themselves. They're so busy, as you were saying, doctor, pouring into others. They're not pouring into themselves. They don't really have anything to give for themselves. And so I always encourage the mamas, first and foremost, take care of you. Make sure you eat. Make sure you do all of your self-care so that you can then do this for your child. And, I have been fortunate enough to speak with some parents who felt comfortable opening up to me about, some anxieties that they may be having, and I can plug them in with our behavioral health team. them and their children as well.
That's excellent. Dr. Garrett, thoughts on that?
She said a mouthful. And one of the things that and I agree with everything, one of the things that combats trauma, those things, the one word, love, the other word, relationships. And so it's really important that we try to do our best to help them build relationships. I know that it's difficult, but as again, we're functioning in our new normal, adding a couple of people to their routine that they might interact with. Some of them have returned to school. It lessens maybe the play time that they might have, but again, the love from others and relationships, strong relationships will help with the traumatic experiences that they have had to endure. And the biggest piece that we keep saying and that we know is that the moms are the ones that are impacted the most. And so again, everything that Dr. Santiago Brown stated is what is needed in self-care. And the one other piece that I want to add is self-care is more than one day. We think that if we go get a massage and that's done for the month, we've done our self-care. Absolutely not. Self-care is something that we have to do every day. And so we just have to figure out what that is. I have people laughing all the time. I'm addicted to TikTok at night because it makes me laugh. That's the last thing that I do before I go to sleep because I need laughter and humor to get through the day. So I think that we have to figure out what that is and know that self-care is not something that happens once and then we're done. We have to continuously take care of ourselves. And so also, I think that's something that's helpful for the mothers and whoever's the caregiver of younger children to make sure that they understand that and that's something that they continuously add into their routine on a daily basis. And I think that Dr. Roundtree would definitely agree with the routine part and making sure that they're taking care of themselves and pouring from their overflow to whomever that they're caregiving for.
I love it. You said that your self-care daily has become TikTok.
It has been. Just the laughter.
I love you and my 9-year-old granddaughter because that baby there, I just don't even understand. But
I'm getting a degree in TikTok University. That's my next thing.
I love it. But you made me think about something. And Dr. Roundtree, I'm gonna direct this to have you start. But one of the things that I found that I did last year was I've always felt like my home is my sanctuary, but I really got into my home being my sanctuary, right? I'm like, if I'm gonna be here,
I'm gonna make it be.
Then it's gonna be like I'm on an island. Or whatever room I'm in, it's going to feel like I'm on vacation in that space, right? Exactly. And so there's this Facebook group. This is why I'm starting this, Dr. Garrett. There's this Facebook group, Black Women Who Love Outdoor Spaces.
I'm a member.
And my friend started saying, you need to join this group. And so I started looking. I was like, oh, there is a tribe like me.
Absolutely.
They're out there and they're decorating their backyards. And yes. I mean, girl, I got the shower curtain hanging on the fence thing.
Do you have the egg chair, the egg chair though?
I did not do the egg chair because I got sort of a, nice sized derriere and I did not want to be uncomfortable on any seating in my home. And so, but my friends tell me that it's comfortable.
It is.
But I found that I needed to do things to create my sanctuary. Right?
Absolutely.
And those things became baked into my daily routine. So I will get up in the morning and have my coffee in my backyard. And I'll meditate with myself, me, self, and God. And I started having church in my backyard. On Sunday, I listened to church. And my neighbors, I know they're like, really? Really? Because I'm singing, I'm praising. They're like, really? 7:30 service, this what you gonna do?
Right.
But for me, that I had to create my place of peace. And so, Dr. Roundtree, as we are, and as you are daily in that place of encouraging someone to keep going when they want to give up, and you see that they're on the cusp, but all of the powers that be seem to be going against them. And then COVID hit. And they're like, I just can't anymore. What things have you done yourself to create your place of peace, to allow your cup to stay full so that you can give from your abundance and overflow?
Well, you know what? I think we have to think about how we use our energy.
Mm.
And all of you have talked about we can't give it all away and expect to give it and be able to take care of ourselves. And so for myself, I really realized that I must create the routine that would give me the best use of my energy. Because if you think about it, your brain and your body likes to go into low gear at all times. And and in this crisis, we were in high gear all the time. That's how I felt. I felt like it was constantly, how are we dealing with this? And so I had to stop that and really look at and make some priorities. It's a priority. Who's going to be the priority? Yourself, your family, your loved ones. And where am I going to place my energy? So, I can't preach routine any more than I can. So I found myself literally moving around my house. It was like, okay, this is how I'm going to break this up. I'm going to move to my office. I'm working, and now I'm going to stop. I'm going to the family room. And that means work is over. And I'm going to go down and let my brain rest. So I think you have to kind of figure out where your best energy is. Put the energy in the morning. If that's your best time, relax at night. Some of us are night people. If that's when it is, use your night, then come down. But I found that. And then I think the other thing is it really taught us to appreciate other people. And the small things people do for us. And so kind of giving other people praise also helps you to realize that, you're not alone in this.
Absolutely.
I totally agree. And with that, we're going to start getting we have questions from the audience. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So we're going to get ready for those, but to the point of, again, for yourself, Dr. Santiago Brown, you have been out there. How have you given yourself grace? What have you done for yourself?
That is a really good question, because there are some days where, like with anyone, I manage better than others. And there's some days where it's just really, really hard. One thing that I do is I like to unplug. And so I won't watch the news. The news can be very depressing. I'll read the news, that way I can just filter out. I'm not being subjected to anything. I can, don't like the headline, let me go past. That's really important. Sleep as well, because we have to recharge our bodies. And I get up at about 5 a.m. That first hour of the day is just for me. That's for my prayer. That's for my workout. And it's quiet. So sorry. Excuse me. Thought I had everything silenced. Excuse me. But yeah, that's kind of what I do, because I do spend my entire day pouring into others. And it's a blessing to be able to do that, but it does get exhausting. It's spiritually exhausting.
I could only imagine how exhausting. And again, you have been in my consistent prayers throughout this entire time. Before then, but even more throughout this entire time. Dr. Roundtree, we have a question I'm going to ask you to weigh in on. And that would be recommendations for those of us who work at home and will continue to work at home that may not have appropriately furnished, if you will, office space. What can we do to mitigate that? What do you recommend?
I hate to say this, but you may need to invest in a chair.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small investment, but a chair that is the right height and the right width in the bottom so that you get enough support under your legs and your legs are not as crunched, which is what office chairs do for us. Also something that supports your back better. A lot of dining room chairs are very pretty, but they're not very back supportive. So I know my son stole my chair in the pandemic and I ended up buying another one somehow, and he took it into his office or into where his computer was. But I think a chair investment, if you don't need to have very fancy, but you just need something that kind of molds with your back and your legs, and you can adjust the height to how high you are.
I have found myself looking at the specs for everything because everything is delivered. Amazon delivers everything, right? And so I'm like, how much weight can it hold? What's the width? What's the height? What's the seat to floor height? What's
Absolutely.
the back height? So, but if you look at the specs, then you probably can get free shipping and get the chair to come right to your door. And I think you're right. Just my personal opinion. That's probably the best investment for any of us that find ourselves working from home from a physical, occupational. I remember ergonomics training, right? And now it's like, what? Who?
I think the other thing I would add is most of us, time gets away from you when you're in your own home.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to take those breaks. You might be sitting there longer than you would typically sit at your desk because you might get up to walk across and pick up some paper or something. So you do need to get up and take breaks. And I know for me, that was definitely, I looked up and it's like 5 hours later and you're still sitting in the same place and staring at the same screen. And you need to break that and think about it. When we're at the office, you go to the water fountain, you go get a cup of coffee, you say hello to somebody who stopped by your desk. We don't have those interruptions when you're all by yourself.
Right.
So you have to build in your own.
You're absolutely right. And then also you have the spectrum that people expect you to constantly be tethered. And so because you're working from home, what else you going to do but work, right? And so your day that would have been broken up through commute, through a lunch break, through a facility break, through a walk across the to the other office to talk to your colleague, and next thing you know, it's 20 minutes later. You aren't getting any of that. You're working straight through, and then you look and go, okay, my eyes hurt, my back hurts, my legs hurt. What's wrong with me? I got an attitude.
and straight, like she said, sitting down, and I found myself doing that, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? I had enough. I'm sitting right by my patio, and I'm like, I spent all this time decorating and in that group that you're in as a member. And I'm like, why am I not enjoying this? So I got up and I would go and take my break out on my deck and just walk around. I might run into my neighbor and we're having a conversation because they needed the interaction. And we have such a fun area in my neighborhood where I live. I'm lucky enough to have them that we can have these conversations. And we were just having conversations, even just walking the dog. And so it was just having that interaction, just like Dr. Roundtree said, and making sure that, everyone had their personal touches and that they could say, hey, at least I got a chance to talk to you today. I talked to somebody and I just wasn't sitting behind the screen all day, because I found myself doing that. And I'm like, it wasn't good, and it wasn't good for my legs. And I could sit there for hours and I'm like, what is wrong with you? So I had to talk to myself and have a conversation, and I had to react. And then also one of the other things was to do the exercise. I bought myself a bike. a recumbent bike, and I can go in there and then ride it for 15 minutes, get off, go do what I'm going to do, and I might go back for 15 minutes later. So those were some of the things that I needed to do for me.
I can totally relate. I find myself, if I don't get up in the morning and go, I try to go to the track in the morning and get a couple miles in real quick, because once my day starts, then I don't have any more control, right? And so I try to get it out. And I find myself with a serious attitude if I go like more than 3 days without getting some type of workout in. I mean, I'm grouchy. I'm like, really, I need this now. It's medicinal for me now to get out and do it. And I started it with my coat on last winter, and just going out and coat, boots, everything. I'm like, I'm on the track. Did they shovel? Good. Then I can get outside. And now it's just become part of my daily medicine, my vitamin D break. Dr. Santiago Brown, we have another question from the audience, and they work in a high school, Chicago Public High School, with about 1,400 people. Including students and staff. They're fully vaccinated and masks are mandatory, but they are curious if there's any more that they can do to protect themselves.
Great question. So, I'm not sure if a lot of the viewers know, but, masks have been mandated for our schools for, I believe, pre-K through university level. Which is great, because that was my big fear about children going back to school. I'm still a little apprehensive because, we see people who don't wear their mask properly. If I can see your nose, you're not doing it right. And unfortunately, a lot of children, particularly young children who just don't know any better, but even teenagers, it gets uncomfortable wearing that mask all day. And so they will pull it down under their nose. And so even though we're fully vaccinated, the CDC never said that if you're fully vaccinated that you can't contract COVID. It was always said that you could, but the vaccine would help to protect you against severe, disability and death. Just like, a seatbelt will protect us somewhat, but not 100%. So for that person tuning in, one thing I recommend, of course, is trying to stay as distant as possible. It can be difficult in a school with so many people, but as much as possible. Of course, being very cognizant about not touching the eyes. Some people will even wear a face shield because it's a little bit, it kind of keeps you in that mindset of not touching your face if you have this shield on. It gets hot, but it does kind of help. And of course, all these self-care techniques, good nutrition, as many plants as you possibly can, because plants are anti-inflammatory. They help to boost our immune system. Sleep also helps with that. Exercise, tuning into our spirituality. Clean water, of course, as opposed to other drinks. But that's pretty much where we are. We just have to be very careful, very diligent, and, stay as safe as we possibly can.
Thank you so much, Dr. Santiago Brown. That was a great prescription for personal care. You took us right into that last question, didn't you, girl? I love it. We did not practice this either. So, Dr. Roundtree, I'm going to ask you, what is your personal prescription for self-care?
I think I would just have to say is giving myself grace in that I can only do what I can do in one day. And I'll wake up tomorrow and do the best I can tomorrow. So I try to be the best of myself each day. And then hope that I have the opportunity to do the best of myself the next day. And so I prioritize what I can do in a day and then establish that routine that keeps me so I can use that energy when I need it the most. And to deal with other people's issues or my own issues or emergencies, because emergencies still happen during the pandemic. So that routine is very important so that I can gear up when I have to. So that's my prescription.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garrett.
Definitely, I would want you guys to learn more about trauma. And one of the things that I would say is that Oprah wrote a great book, and she learned more about her own trauma. And I've shared it with my classes. Read some passages depending on what topic we're talking about. I think it's a reminder of what has happened and what we're continuing to go through in our new normal. The other thing is have some fun. And give yourself, like she said, grace. But the other piece of it is do some things that you haven't done. I think for me, during this time period, I went back to, I grew up on a farm. I learned to plant. I learned how to plant again. And so I worked on doing that in my garden. I made those kinds of things happen for myself, rediscovering me. And so I put some time into just reminding myself of what it is that I had done that I stopped doing when I became somebody's mother, and other things. And so I got to know Sherlyn again. I love music, so dancing. Yes, definitely dancing. I won't show those skills off. So
Thank you so much, Dr. Garrett. We're out of time.
yes.
Yes, I know, right? This went so, ladies, thank you for honoring me. This was like the best sister girl roundtable conversation ever. I hope that our audience enjoyed it as much as we did, and that each of you, I'm going to go back to that word, Dr. Roundtree. Give yourself some grace. Mm-hmm. It's a good thing. Take care of you before you can take care of anybody else. Live in your abundance and overflow. Have a good evening, all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.